Hey, it's Dan Turner at Northwest Community Church, coming to you with another 5 minutes of inspiration today. And so we're looking again at the fruit of the Spirit that Paul talks about in Galatians, the 5th chapter. And so take your Bibles, turn over there, and take a look at that. We'll be referencing it and also looking at the book of Philippians very briefly. Last week we talked about the first fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, and those fruit are all fruit that we all hope to experience inwardly. We want to feel love, we want to feel peace, we want to feel joy, all of those things. Today we're talking about the outward fruit, kindness and goodness and patience. These three fruit related to how we treat and interact with others. So, sometimes we can try our best to fabricate our own fruit. We can try to be patient, knowing that if we're patient, that it'll lead to something better. We can, kind of like a return on our investment, that if we're just patient, then the good things will come out of it. So we just try harder. So all of those, patience, kindness, and goodness, we can try to fabricate, but then the truth is, we can only fabricate those fruit for so long. And so I think all of us, as we're confined in the midst of this COVID-19 shutdown period, we're all finding that those fruit of the Spirit are hard to keep fabricating when you're shut up 24 hours a day with family and friends or kids or spouse or roommate. Maybe even yourself, you're having a hard time living with yourself. But the more time goes by, you start seeing, and maybe you're getting discouraged because you thought you were a patient or kind or good person, but you're seeing sort of the worst starting to pop out. So I want to suggest to you why that is today, because we're not talking about trying to be patient. We're talking about the fact that God makes us patient. We're not talking about a person that tries to be kind. We're talking about a person that is kind. See the difference between those two? And so the three fruit, first one is patience. And Paul says the Spirit gives us patience. We can't push it out of ourselves. I mentioned last week, walking by a tree and the tree is grunting to try to make fruit or leaves. That doesn't happen. Leaves come out of a tree because it's connected and it's receiving nutrients and it's naturally growing. And when we are naturally connected to Christ, then we begin to grow these fruit. And so they're gifts. And so the first fruit is patience, and Paul's talking about, enduring wrongs without becoming angry, enduring wrongs without taking vengeance. And in Galatians 5, he's writing to a church that's got a lot of conflict, and so there's a lot of different personalities, and they're trying to work things out. And Paul says, you know what? Let the Spirit give you patience. You're having trouble getting along? Let God's work take place in your life, and it's going to grow patience. The second outward fruit is kindness. And the word for kindness in the Greek is very similar to the word for goodness. There's just a very subtle difference. But Paul, again, is talking about being friendly and generous and considerate of other people. Again, he's writing that to this really deeply conflicted church. And then finally, goodness is the last outward fruit. And Paul's talking about showing concern and character and conduct. It was Coach John Wooden that said, be more concerned with your character than your reputation, because your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are. It was Wooden that also said the real test of character comes not when people are watching us, but when we're by ourselves. And so probably all of us are looking in the mirror and seeing things right now that we don't like as we're confined, and we're sort of running out of our own energy to produce those fruit. And so I just hear God saying to us in the midst of this time, you know what, lean into me and let me produce that fruit in your life. Stop trying to be patient and get closer to me, and let me give you that gift of patience that's going to flow out of your soul. All of these fruit of the Spirit come back to what Paul talked about in Philippians, the 2nd chapter, and I just want to read those couple of verses before we go. Philippians, the second chapter, in verse 3, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interests of others. And so it's all about giving up of ourselves for others. Last week I shared this as well. So if you want to grow more fruit, tend to the weeds in your orchard. Make sure that you're rooting out sin through the help of God. Stay connected to God through prayer and through reading His Word. And then finally, keep in step with God's Spirit. God's Spirit is going to give you those gifts, but you've got to be listening for the Spirit's voice. And here's the cool thing about all of this, is when we produce our own fruit, then we get the credit. We purpose that we were going to be patient and good and kind during this period, and we did it, and we're proud of ourselves. But when we recognize that those gifts come from God, then we can brag on God and say, I don't know how I made it through the COVID-19 crisis, but God produced some fruit in me, and He grew some fruit in me that I didn't know I had. Isn't that a cool difference? I'm praying, friends, that even in the midst of this difficult time, that God is growing some fruit in you that He would never have been able to grow otherwise. And so let Him do His work. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.